Breaking news, folks. Where do we start with this? Khamzat Chimaev, we already knew he was out of his fight against Robert Whittaker, but in steps Ikram Alisov. This was not the fight I was expecting. And on top of that, UFC 303 has a new main and co-main event, and Jamahal is out of his fight against Carlos Ulberg. It's now going to be Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka 2. Co-main event is going to be Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez, and now Carlos Ulberg is going to be fighting Anthony Smith. Wow. Okay. This is officially the craziest week in MMA history. Excuse me. By far. I was reminded of UFC 153 back in 2012, which is over a decade ago, when, as you can see here, this is for people who weren't following the news back then, Jose Aldo, who was going to headline the event, pulled out because of an injury he suffered when riding his motorcycle, and Rampage Jackson, who was fighting Glover Teixeira in the co-main event, also pulled out due to a bicep injury. So both fights in the end were scrapped. Teixeira fought on the card, but it was in just one of the feature bouts. They had Anderson Silva versus Stephan Bonner headline the card, and the co-main event was Alexandre Nogueira versus God, name escapes me. It's so long ago. I can't remember who he fought. It was some guy who Roy Nelson thumped in one round. Name escapes me. Dave Herman. And yeah, that was crazy because, as you can see here, according to this news, it happened on the same day, September 11th, and there were rumours of Vanderlei Silva stepping in to fight Chael Sonnen. The UFC certainly wanted that because that was a big grudge match, and both guys were far less washed up at the time, but didn't happen. So yeah, is what it is. That was a crazy a week in general, but this tops that because you have two massive cards, two of the biggest cards of the year. I'm not saying they were top 3 or 4 or 5, that's beside the point. They were two of the biggest cards of the year, top 10, whatever, and their main event falls out 10 days before the event. One falls out within almost decent. There have been main event changes, of course, with far less notice, but just because of all the drama surrounding Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler, absolutely crazy. So anyway, how do we break this all down? Well, first of all, Robert Whittaker versus Ikram Alisov. The problem with this, obvious out of the way first, is that Ikram Alisov is not ranked. And when his name got brought up, I thought, hang on, hasn't Alisov had 2 fights cancelled this year? He was supposed to fight Andre Muniz at UFC ESPN 58, and he pulled out. And then he was also supposed to fight Anthony Hernandez at UFC 298, and he withdrew and got replaced by Roman Kopylov. So it was, again, not the fight I expected, to put it mildly, and just completely unexpected. Ikram Alisov not being ranked means that, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, Robert Whittaker is not going to gain much from this. In fact, he's really not going to gain anything aside from money, because if he wins, people will say, well, you beat an unranked middleweight, completely ignoring the circumstances, but it is what it is. So that's the unfortunate thing, and Whittaker is probably going to have to fight again. And I already said in my video talking about the news of Chimaev being out, if this had happened a few weeks ago, then we would have had Sean Strickland who could step in, or Jared Cannonier, and those are 2 excellent fights, big for Whittaker, big for the division, etc. But yeah, it's just so disappointing, and I wasn't a huge fan of the Nastina Mavov fight, but it would have been better than this. And yeah, so it is what it is, disappointing. And Whittaker, he's also not a guy who's in favour of fighting down in the rankings. Like when Brendan Allen was calling him out after his win over Paul Craig, Whittaker brushed it off, and he was more happy to fight Paulo Costa, a guy who he said he would never fight again because, or he would never agree to fight again because Costa kept pulling out. So yeah, this is not ideal for Whittaker. Hopefully, he isn't affected by all of this crazy news. We'll wait and see what happens. I still pick him to win, of course. Now, Conor McGregor apparently being injured, and in steps Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka too. Well, Pereira saves the day once again, and it hasn't even been. It's crazy how short notice this is, first of all, and how it has barely been 6 months since the first fight. But with that being said, there isn't much you could go with. There weren't many choices, so yeah, you have to make do with what you have. And Prochazka did look really good last time against Rakic. And look, am I going to pick him to win? No, but at the same time, he did do better, for whatever it's worth, against Pereira than somebody like Jamahal Hill and even Jan Blachowicz, because that was a far more compromised Alex Pereira. So it is what it is. We've seen it before. I believe it will be an exciting finish because all Alex Pereira fights have dramatic finishes. But, it's certainly not the most ideal circumstance, but what can you do? As for Diego Lopez versus Brian Ortega, great fight for both men because Ortega, first of all, we've all criticised him for not fighting often enough. So here's a quick turnaround. And, well, it's actually a quickish turnaround, I should say, for both men, particularly Diego Lopez, who is riding high from UFC 300. So, yeah, to go in there against a top 5 guy, good on him. Ortega, I picked against him when he fought Yair Rodriguez again, just because of all the layoffs, all the injuries, and that chin at some point is going to give way. I know there are guys like Robbie Lawler who are able to maintain that chin through thick and thin, but yeah, 9 times out of 10, the chins go. So, in fact, more than that, really. And Ortega has taken so much punishment, it's hard for me to see him winning this. I'm going to do breakdowns closer to the fight because right now there is just so much news and boxing to cover as well as this. So, trying to cover it all. Absolute craziness. The craziest week in MMA history, I'm sure of it. Let me know if there are any more that top this. But yeah, I thought UFC 153 was crazy when I thought of it, but this tops that. So much to digest. Great fights all around. Not ideal, but yeah, boy oh boy, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall and seen Dana White's reaction to all of this. Drop your thoughts down below about all of this news, guys. Catch you guys later. Like the video and subscribe to the channel for more.